Now a Team 10 investigation into racial discrimination in mortgage lending. Nearly a century ago, the federal government adopted policies that kept Black and immigrant families from buying homes in certain areas. Our Team 10 investigator Adam Rakusin shows why advocates say this is still happening despite laws designed to prevent it.
Here we are in 2021. San Diego is one of the hottest housing markets in the country. While you see homes selling for record prices, what you don't see are the people who aren't getting those home loans, the ones that can't feel that pride of home ownership, and the policies put in place nearly 100 years ago that still have an impact on the haves and have-nots in America's finest city.
We have stuff called fair lending, fair housing, all that stuff, but is it really fair? That's the question, and it is not.
Derek Luckett is the head of Destiny 6 Financial. It's a San Diego-based real estate and mortgage company.
I had a gentleman that's 80-something years old. He wanted to refinance. He hadn't refinanced in years. And he asked me, he says, Mr. Luckett, I need you to tell me something. And I say, well, what's that, sir? He says, am I still going to be, are they still going to base my loan off my zip code?
To fully understand that fear, you have to understand San Diego's past and its history with redlining.
The redlining essentially was a way to restrict certain groups, mainly African Americans at that time.
In the 1930s, the Homeowners Loan Corporation was established. The government program would not buy and offer mortgages in areas they deemed economically hazardous. To identify those areas, maps were made of major cities, with each neighborhood ranked as either A, B, C, or D. Neighborhoods ranked D were shown in red on the map and were ineligible for federal mortgages in what became known as redlining. According to a City of San Diego report, those neighborhoods were often the oldest neighborhoods in the city, occupied by lower-income residents and people of color. The report says not long after that, the Federal Housing Administration used the same redlining principles to deny mortgage insurance. Soon, banks and lending institutions wouldn't loan to those red areas. Think about it this way. When you head south of Interstate 8, in some places it was impossible to get a loan. That's where the majority of African Americans, Asian, and Hispanic residents lived. Experts say the federal government deprived many communities of a once-in-a-generation wealth-building opportunity afforded to white Americans.
These neighborhoods were where people of color lived, people that were poor, people that were immigrants, and we can now look at that time, we can look at it now, and we can say there's still poor communities, there's still heavily immigrant communities.
Nearly 100 years later, housing advocates like Ricardo Flores say there are still huge discrepancies in lending. According to a regional analysis on fair housing, white applicants at all income levels generally had the highest loan approval rates. Approval rates for Black and Hispanic applicants were well below the approval rates for white and Asian applicants in the same income groups in 2012. The report says those gaps had somewhat narrowed by 2017, but were still present. Black applicants consistently had the lowest approval rates compared to other racial ethnic groups in the same income groups. The San Diego chapter of the NAACP also looked at lending data from 2018 and 2019 and released a report saying financial discrimination on the basis of race is rampant in most San Diego communities.
I hear the stories of my mom and dad, the things that they had to go through growing up.
Cherie Jones owns SAKK Realty.
Now, it's not in black and white, it's more subtle. It's more so like you question, was I being discriminated, or did that really happen, or maybe I'm overthinking it.
As a successful realtor and leader in the community, Jones has heard people's fears. She's now working on education and empowerment.
We're not even going to be able to buy, or that I'm going to be pushed into a situation. And so that's where we kind of come into play and educate them. No, I have a lender, or have lenders that they can lend to you, and this is how it's going to work. And even if you can't be approved, we're going to teach you what you need to do to tweak it so that way you can get approved.
The City of San Diego says local jurisdictions have no influence on lending practices. The best thing they can do to prevent discrimination is by offering fair housing programs, education, and outreach, as well as continuing the monitoring and investigation of fair housing practices. For people like Derek Luckett,
sometimes you have to get uncomfortable to get comfortable. You know, you have to not be afraid of change in order to make sure that change goes across the board.
Adam Rakusin, ABC 10 News.
The report found that the effect of past practices such as redlining still do remain, even though they have not been considered unconstitutional. They have now been considered unconstitutional. The city and the county of San Diego created the Reinvestment Task Force to help increase financial inclusion and economic justice.